first come into the makerspace and they see this regularly, I think it's important because it talks about failure and it talks about finding your passions. It's super, super fast, super, super easy, but to remind our students that it's okay to try and it's okay to fail is a common theme in the makerspace, because they will, especially if you're going to give them challenges and ask them to try something new. This is taking our students out of our comfort zone, especially with this day and age with technology. You know, my son, he's 6th grade, and he's looking for his shoes, and he walks into his room, and he stands there, doesn't see him, and walks out and says, "Mom, I can't find my shoes." He doesn't take the time to walk up and dig and look for it. He wants immediate gratification, walking in looking for his shoes. And that's how all of our students are. That's because of this social media world that we live in. So when we put our students into this makerspace and we say, hey, we want you to create, they look at you like you're crazy. But it's so important. The skills and those soft skills that they get out of this is so meaningful and it's so beneficial. We have to put those students in that situation. Unfortunately, or fortunately, right now, we live in this time period where we have these makerspaces and they sit in these libraries and they're not being utilized because of the lack of control. So us that have these makerspaces are saying, hey, come on, I'm just doing it with my students in a special, or I'm just doing it with my students in a class. But other teachers can be using those. And they can be taking this idea and those concepts and putting them into their classroom as well. And I'm going to show you some ways that we did that. First off, though, a maker is a mindset. It's not an actual space. So your space probably looks very different than our space. And my space right now looks very different than the space that I had in my school district before. Everybody's space is different, but a maker, that maker thinking, is that mindset. And that's what I'm really going to be focusing on today. All of the activities that we use and we do and I promote and we talk about and we teach follow the engineering design process. And when I say all of them, I mean kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So working with our elementary school librarian and our elementary school teachers, we're using this engineering design process. We have a STEM camp that we ran over the summer. All of the students followed this design process, and we teach those to our students. So they're getting it in kindergarten, they're getting it in 3rd grade, and they're getting it all the way up to the high school. As I said, every makerspace is different. This is just a small glimpse of what our makerspace looked like in the middle school from the district that I worked at before. As you can see, the students could walk right up to the pegboard, grab whatever they needed. It was all labeled. Our students organize that. Our students clean it up, and then they reorganize it. And they love to do it, and I love it when they do it, so I don't have to. But all of it's easy access. There are some storage bins on the side, and then we just constantly buy stuff. You can get that from the hardware store, actually. But what does it need to have? Anything. Again, my makerspace is not going to look the same as yours, and it can have almost anything. We had 3D printers, we had Legos, we had Kinects and drones, we had a Cricut machine, but you don't need to have that for a lot of these activities. You can have straws and marshmallows and cardboard and cups and string and aluminum foil as well. We also had a tool chest. We got this from a hardware store. Okay, this is called our Maker Cart. I know that they sell Maker Carts. We decided to just go to Home Depot and just buy a tool chest that was on wheels. All of this is labeled. The teachers could sign out our Maker Cart. We had one at this time, but as it's becoming more popular, there's been discussion about having more than one. It is filled upon request. As you can see, these are all labels. These are just the basic stuff that we had in our Maker Cart, but we would fill it up based on teacher need. And then upon return, there was a form that the teachers filled out saying, hey, we're out of this. We need more of this. So then we could easily order whatever we needed and then refill it. This cart could be signed up through, myself when I was in the library, and then the teachers could just rent it out for their classroom for the couple days if they needed it. So you have your space, you have your maker cart, teachers have all the supplies, now what? The first two things that I'm going to talk about real briefly are just easy, common things that could be placed in any single classroom. The first one is the green screen. A lot of you may have a green screen already. You could easily have a wall painted green, or you could just have a piece of fabric. But TouchCast is the app that we used for our green screen, and this produces that interactive videos. So with TouchCast Studio, you can use basically a high-end TV studio at your fingertips. Record a video, edit clips, add dynamic interactive features. You can create your own weather report, become a news anchor, annotate a web page, or be a YouTube star, which my children are obsessed with. So here's some application, and this is wordy. I did this, I'm not going to read it all to you, but I wanted you to have it. So for math class, the idea here is for students to act out math problems. So just give them a scenario. Say, hey, if Tommy drove 55 miles in an hour, how many miles could he drive in 36 hours? Make a video. You'd be surprised at what those students could come up with. One, they have to solve the problem. Then they have to plan out how they're going to show that problem. So they can use maps, they can use figures, they can use images. They have to plan, they have to work together. And then after this is done, you'll have this so they could teach students. So you could break them up into small groups. You could give them groups and have them, hey, why don't you do this problem, you do this problem, you do this problem. And all of a sudden, solving a word problem is fun because you're using video. For ELA, you can do a green screen story. This one, I think ELA and green screen kind of go hand in hand. This one fits fairly well together. So just becoming part of your favorite story, using those illustrations, doing a book talk, acting out those favorite parts. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Science class, we had students use the green screen to illustrate that scientific process. So they created illustrations of a diagram. They glued those, they painted them green, they used the green screen app, they used stuff from the Makerspace and the green screen to explain the process, to explain the water cycle, to explain the various processes of growth. And then in social studies, again, just like ELA, this fits pretty well together. So students can travel back in time, interview famous people, actors, etc., and they could reenact those historical scenes. So instead of reading that in the textbook, they could just simply act it out and teach each other. The next one that I think is pretty common as well is stop motion. So stop motion is that animated filmmaking technique. Objects are physically manipulated in small increments. You can use clay. I didn't have that on my list earlier, but clay was really popular. I can't believe I forgot that. Play-Doh, those little movable figures, but Barbies and Lego guys, anything that you would have laying around, kids love that. And it's hilarious watching an 8th grader sit there with like Barbies and Lego guys and play with those action figures. It's awesome. But, ooh, I missed a slide. Oh, I did. I'll add that. I had a list of 5. For some reason, it went right to 4. Anyway, so you can create a step-by-step instructional video. They can show how to annotate text and how to do a close reading when you're doing stop motion. You can do book retells. They can select their favorite book to retell during those small groups and use their little guys to do so. And I'll add that extra slide. I can't believe it's missing. Anyway, but the premise of all of this is, and I'm sharing you prompts, I'm sharing you ideas, but it's important, and this seems contradictory, but it's important that when it comes to creativity, they do need some limitations. So they do need some sort of prompt, and I wanted to kind of go back to this. Guys, I feel like I'm rambling and you're all just staring at me. Any questions at all? Somebody? No? Yes, please.
What's your budget?
Okay, good question. We write a lot of grants. Okay, so a lot of this stuff to start up our Makerspace here was from the Fairview Foundation. So we had a foundation that kind of started it, the PTO renovated it, that sort of thing. Then this school district, the one that I'm referring to, has a library budget. Within that library budget, you can use it on Makerspace stuff. So it's in the budget to kind of keep it under control, per se. But with that said, we have a lot of parents and a lot of people that donate a lot of items, and we write a lot of grants.
But like, if I wanted to recreate something like this, and I was like, it's gonna cost this much money, like how much would it cost to start a space like this?
Start up a makerspace itself,
Or start up one.
or do an activity.
Start up a makerspace itself.
Okay, well, it depends on what you're gonna have. Okay, so if you were gonna do a makerspace cart, it depends on what you're gonna supply the cart with. Because honestly, some of the activities that I'm gonna show you next are minimal cost, like aluminum paper, paper towels, and some straws. If you want a full-blown makerspace, depending on how big you want it, I mean, it's gonna add up. But that would allow an entire class to go in and do a special. You're renovating the room. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a makerspace, but I don't always provide consumables. Do you think that's a barrier to people using it, like that they provide their own consumables? Or do you think that it's important for the makerspace to provide the aluminum foil, like all those little bits? Like, am I doing the shopping for my teachers as a librarian, or is it better to ask them to do the shopping for themselves, all within a budget, like our school budget?
I mean, as a teacher, a former teacher, I would like to walk into a space and have those materials there. And if I knew that I wanted extra, then I could add to those. Just because it's easier. Kind of like a lesson plan, right? A project, instead of them doing the legwork. Them having to go out, shop, supply all those materials and buy all those materials, and then take on this idea is really overwhelming. Because I really think that the makerspace idea, that lack of, it feels almost as though you're losing control. You're putting the control in the students. When I started this position in the library, there was a huge technology piece. The school district is one-to-one iPad, I will tell you that. The one that I'm at now is not. And there's a lot of technology. So there is the drones, and there's the robots, and all of this stuff that's constantly coming out. And I'm like, I am a 7th grade English language arts teacher. What am I doing? What world am I living in? I can't tell you how many times I gave the students a box and I said, hey, teach me. Show me how to do this. And it was the best activity and the best thing I've ever done. Because they're teaching me, they're learning, they're engaged, they're talking, they're creating videos. You can post those videos to teach other students. Amazing. But it's a lack of control. Because now I'm giving up my classroom. And for other teachers to walk into that makerspace, that's hard for them. Or to even take on this activity. Because it's a totally different thinking.
So how do you market it to them? I mean, if we do give up this on how do you?
So, couple things. I'm going to show you some challenges that I had the students do and some activities that I did where I actually went in and I did that with the students and they just helped me. It's easier with 2 adults versus 1 at first. Kind of put that in that spot, but at the same time not. Having the materials then for them kind of releases a little bit of that. The planning ahead of time, giving them those, you know, hey, you're gonna do this and then this and this. Making it as easy as possible. But honestly, the first time is overwhelming, but they need to experience that because then they see how it works.
Sorry, one more question.
You're fine. No, please ask away. I don't want to talk to you.
Do you have a set of kids, like when you were working in this, like your technical district as a librarian, did you have a class that you were working with? Like, did you have access to kids, or were you relying on teachers giving kids to you in order to get them to, like, the kids to interact with you?
Yes, that's a really good question. I actually had a 5th grade and a 6th grade class, but then at the same exact time, the library was open. So I did other things. So I only taught 2 periods a day. And I'm going to show you what I did with my 5th and 6th graders. Yeah. The materials of the makerspace aren't enough though. It's more about the challenges and the tools that you're using. So the following challenges developed are kind of help to show you how you can throw this into your classroom, give teachers some ideas. The first one was that wild weather report, where you use a green screen to create your own weather report. The only thing that you would need for this would be obviously an iPad or a tripod, the green screen, and then TouchCast. The next, oh, go ahead.
When you say green screen, though, you can use just like green tape or
You
make your
can,
own green screen.
yeah.
You don't have to spend hundreds of
No,
dollars.
not at all, not at all. And if you go to like Joann Fabrics or Marshalls and just get green fabric and you can just hang it up, it works beautifully. And then you can fold it up and shove it in the bin and you have it for later.
I would say that on Amazon now, you can get a collapsible green screen for almost nothing. And then you have the frame and everything with it versus having to try and like tack it up to a wall.
Yeah, figure out
and
how you're
deal
gonna
with
tape it.
shadows and all of that.
Yeah. And you can get multiple, so you have groups of students that are using it at different times too. Yeah. Maker challenge number 2, you can challenge your students to become a YouTube star. They could create an Instagram story or film an unboxing video. There are children around the world that are making billions of dollars right now by doing unboxing videos, teaching kids where they're just literally, like I was sharing with you, teach me how to use this. And they're opening it up and they're unboxing it and they're talking about it and they're teaching others. For Maker Challenge number 3, the budget. So when you're giving students any challenge, and some of the challenges that I'm going to share with you, consider adding a budget to the mix. So if you say for every straw, it costs 10 cents. You know, for every marshmallow, it costs a penny. And give them those materials, have that budget list on the board, and then give them a limit. They're not allowed to go over $5. And so whatever they're creating, whatever they're doing, they have to follow that budget. Kind of puts an interesting twist on things. And when they're building and creating, they pay attention. Also, they're not wasting materials, which is a win. The Marshmallow Challenge. This is an interesting TED Talk. And I posted it on here. It's 7 minutes. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch it here, but it is there for you. And I'm also going to upload this to the P&C session, so you'll have this presentation. But it talks about giving students masking tape, string spaghetti, and large marshmallows, and having them build a tower. They have 18 minutes to build that, supporting the weight. It also talks about the difference between having adults do that in a session versus kindergartners and the impact. If you've never seen this, I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking at infusing that maker thinking into your school. Ready, Set, Design is another challenge where you have paper bags and then craft office supplies, you know, like paper clips and index cards. This is another one that would take about a class period, and there's an example on how to do that in this video as well. Float My Boat. This uses aluminum foil, pennies, styrofoam, and a container filled with water. This one is challenging students to design a raft that's made out of aluminum foil. So we took this, and there is a PDF on how to kind of go through this design process that I did attach to this. But with that said, we took this idea and we used it for our social studies class in ELA, teamed up together. We were doing Greek and Roman mythology, and we were doing a unit. We decided to have stations, and they had to build a boat, and then we had another group of students that were doing launchers, and they had to launch marshmallows, and we just themed it around of whatever ELA unit we were using, and that was really helpful. It was awesome. The students loved it. They were doing the science, they were doing the STEM, they were working together, but it fit with our content. They can build a pizza box, simple circuit. And I did include directions here on how to do all of these. These links should be active. Again, my email address is on here if you can't access anything. This is right from the internet though. Paper circuits, same thing. They can build a Christmas card, a Valentine's Day card, give it to their parents. It lights up. This is super fun, super easy, pretty inexpensive. Squishy circuits. So that's like the makey stuff. If you're walking around today and tomorrow, you're probably going to see a lot of that. Build a simple hydraulic machine. Again, there's a link there. And an LED popsicle flashlight. One way to incorporate text evidence for you ELA folks, this is one of my favorite activities to do. Have them build a model, say of a coral reef, using Connects or Legos. Then they have to cite at least one piece of evidence from the text to kind of match up with their model, okay? So hey, they're digging into this text, they're reading about a coral reef, they're talking about it, they close read that article, they're pulling that text, that's their evidence, now they have to build it. Now you have to show it. So it's taking that text evidence piece and it's making it a little bit more concrete. Zeros and ollies, you could create a maze. In order to successfully navigate the maze, they have to use angles, degrees, inertia, science, math, those learning targets. The idea when you have a makerspace and you're creating these challenges is to answer these following questions. So what's the goal? Who do students work with? What are the materials? How much time do they have? How will they share it? And are there creative restraints? I'm going to show you on a big scale one activity that we did. This was with grade 6, English Language Arts, Social Studies. This was with our gifted students as well as the entire whole grade level. So our gifted students created this project. They used the Makerspace to put it together. So that wasn't a separate class. That was them coming out of ELA sometimes, them coming out for enrichment, them coming during tutorial, which is like our study hall period. They created this project and then they put it on with our grade 6. This was based on the book Hatchet. Our 6th graders read this book. They were actually just finishing up, I should say. We decided to take the book Hatchet and create a geocaching project. So students were to find tokens and clues throughout our school district to decode the hatching adventure. There were 4 phases of this project. They designed a code, we had GPS coordinates, they designed a geocache container, and they created clues and questions. So for the first part, now I will tell you, we have 3D printers in our makerspace. So this was 3D printed. Okay, that was with the help of, we have a STEM administrator that kind of helped me out with that. So he created these pieces. These are all 3D printed pieces, and they fit over book sheets. So what we had the students do is they had to find a page, and they had to make sure that their piece, they kind of drew it, and they had to come up with a word. So let's just say bear or danger. Okay, and then we made a photocopy of that and figured out where those letters were. And then that was part of our locator. So they would be looking for those, there's a geocaching, so they're looking for those little pieces. They'd go around the school district, they'd find those little pieces, they would hold it up to the book, and they would have to decode that word. Okay, and in the end they would unscramble it. So what does that have to do with the makerspace? Well, first of all, we had the students use their 3D printers to design tokens. So when you finished the challenge, they all had tokens. We had our boards, and our boards had the maps. They had the GPS coordinates down the side, and they also had the clues. So those are some of our students that are building those boards in order to make this happen. They broke them up into teams. They also developed questions regarding the events of the book. So as the students were going around campus, and we split the grade level up in 2. So we had about 70 students one day, 70 students another day. And then they were in 10 groups based on that one big group. The students created challenges and questions. So they would go follow their GPS coordinate, they would show up, and our gifted students were in small groups and they were doing challenges with all of the other students. So they had to build a fire that supported something, not a real fire, I promise you. They had to search for the porcupine sticks. This was they talk about a turtle egg. So they created this in the makerspace and they made this activity. So they were in the makerspace creating these challenges, creating these goals. The students came up with those themselves, and then they got to have the other students go through those. They also created their own geocache container. So here are some examples of some of the geocache containers. We actually just went to the store and bought some PVC pipe and had it cut to size and bought the lids. Super, super inexpensive. Gave it to the students and the students decorated it. They went outside, they found bark, they glued the bark on, they spray painted it. Somebody made theirs a bird, hung it up in a tree. And then we figured out where we were gonna do our GPS coordinates. We did those. We had the students kind of plan where they wanted them, but then we loaded them into the GPS unit, and then we had them go at it. This is an example of the board that the students created that fit pieces, and those are the students using it. Somebody asked a question earlier about what classes did I teach. I did teach 5th grade. With my 5th grade, I did passion projects. So my passion projects was how, in my mind, I could relate that ELA and that research and that library component that I knew I needed to teach as a librarian and I knew that my students needed, but also incorporate the makerspace. So what we decided to do was we decided to do passion projects, which are very similar to Genius Hour. And I believe I noticed on the schedule, and then either today or tomorrow, there's somebody doing a presentation about that. It's amazing. Google offers that 20% time. Find something that you love, find something that you're passionate about, and we'll give you 20% of your time to spend on that, as long as you can show how it's gonna benefit us. So I spun that to my students. I said, hey, what do you want to know? We're in a library. What do you want to learn about? What are you interested in? They obviously were able to share tons and tons of passions, tons of things that they loved, but that's really open-ended. That's what Makerspace is all about. I did have them create an essential question. That took some time, but we had to work through it. That essential question could not be Googleable. Right? You can't, I don't know if that's a word, I just made that up, but it is now. You can't be able to answer that question via Google. And then from there, we came up with a plan. All different kinds of plans, because every student wanted to do something different. So for this example, the student made a cigar box guitar. It actually worked, it was crazy. But he was interested in guitars. And I said, well, what do you want to know? And so he started researching the history of guitars, came across a cigar box guitar, was able to create this cigar box guitar that actually worked, and then did a presentation and shared out that information. This other student wanted to research her family. She was really interested in a family tree, and she wanted to create a family tree. I said, well, what does research look like that? Like, what does that even mean? When we research our family, how do we do that? She came up with questions. She came up with interview questions. She came up with, did some research on the countries that they were from, and she listed those, and then she called other relatives, at home, and she met with parents, and she did interviews on a different level. And then in the Makerspace, she created that family tree. This other student wanted to be an interior designer. That is a 3D image of a house that she created using Tinkercad and then our 3D printer, and printed those off, and then she did a presentation on that. And this student wanted to be an author. She wrote the first chapter of her book. As you can see, some students are using the Makerspace, right? Some of them are on the 3D printer, some of them are building that guitar, but there's other students that were just writing a chapter book, and that's okay. I was infusing those research standards. I met with them one-on-one to talk about, citing evidence and so forth. So I was still able to do that library stuff. This is another activity I took on 6th grade that year, if you couldn't tell. This was me pushing into a 6th grade English language arts class. And we did, again, I was teaching gifted at the time, we did a independent reading with augmented reality. I don't know if this is gonna work, and if it does, it's really embarrassing. Yeah, it's going to. Okay, so here's what we did. We decided them to do a book trailer, okay? But in order to do the book trailer, they had to create a cover with the title and the author. They had to have 4 things, I think it was 4, that represented the book in some way, somehow. So I gave them an example. This is obviously me in a scary face. That's because it's an app. It's called Morpho Booth. On my book trailer, I just used the BFG for example. I have a quote, I have a picture of him, I have some words that would describe the book and describe him. We gave the students some examples, kind of like a one-pager, if you've ever heard of that. So what we did is we had a book trailer, colored, ready to go, and then the students used Morpho Booth to take a picture of themselves or find a picture of a character that they could import into the app, and then you actually talk behind it. When you walk up to your iPad and hold it over the paper, the face pops out, augmented reality, and then talks about the book. So for 30 seconds.
Captured by a giant. In the BFG by Roald Dahl, the BFG is no ordinary bone-crunching giant. He's far too nice and jumbly. I liked how this book featured a giant that was different from the other giants. He did not steal from the humans or eat them. Had she been carried off in the middle of the night by the Bud Blottler, the Flesh Lump Eater, the Bone Cruncher, any of the other giants, rather than the BFG, she would have soon become breakfast. He was so kind. It's lucky for Sophia that he is. I would highly recommend this book to anyone. The BFG gives the message to all readers to keep dreaming.
These are some of our students that are working on this activity, that are drawing their trailers, that are using their iPads to kind of get through that project. They actually ended up presenting to the school board as well. So we had all of their book trailers, and a small group of them went to the school board, passed out those, and the school board got to walk around and watch them, which was a wonderful thing. The students were really proud of that, and really excited to show off their work as well. And then we also were able to hang those up along the wall, and then the students could walk around and watch everybody else's. So this is one way that we decided to kind of promote independent reading, and that's not an easy task for any of you that work in the library, to encourage students to be reading on their own. So this is exciting for them because now they're using technology, and then also they get to talk about their book. It's called Morpho Booth. And I might, let me see if I have it on here. Yeah, so this should be linked when you click on books and augmented reality in that presentation. Let's see if it works for me. Yeah, and so it actually has all of the information on here. So anything that kind of has an active link, I did make live and ready for you. So it has the overview, it has all of the steps. We use Morpho Booth and then HP Reveal. Okay, so we kind of layered both of those. And then there is the rubric, how to plan the audio, the characters, step-by-step instructions.
HP Reveal is shutting down, just FYI.
They are coming up with a new one. Like they're just the whole idea is going into another one, it's transitioning.
We've been using the Thing app because we made a lot of stuff with HP Reveal, and now we're getting a lot of like error messages.
Yeah,
and
they're
trying to use it saying,
transitioning. Well, and honestly, I feel like that's the case for like everything, right? They shut down and then they like just call themselves something different, and they open up and then new enhancements. Yeah, I know. It's very well. It's a disaster. Technology. And then finally, the last thing I just have to share is some exploratories that we did, and there's just a couple pictures that I threw in here. So our schedule in the library, it looked very different. Yes, I had the gifted students. I did teach 5th grade special, and then I taught 6th grade special. For 6th grade special, and I did not throw it up here, I did Shark Tank. Some of you have probably heard of Shark Tank before, or the television show. You've probably heard about that in the classroom as well. That's how I taught my entrepreneurship skills. They still did the research, so I hit that career standard for that college career readiness portfolio. They would research a career that they were interested in. They would research their idea for Shark Tank. They would come up with a business plan, so I would incorporate some math and so forth. They would have their idea. They'd have to look up facts and statistics to support it, because you can't just say, hey, here, buy my idea, right? You need to have research to support that it's a problem. And we talked about how every idea and every invention, every innovation comes from some sort of problem, right? So do some research on that problem to support it. And so that's how I got that library in there. Then they would have to go into the makerspace and they'd have to create a prototype. We would have our panel of judges, and then they'd show up and they would present to the judges. So that's what I did for 6th grade. I didn't include that. I think there's been a lot of presentations in the past on that here.
How long did you see it versus? Was it a year-long class?
No, 30 days. Yeah, so the passion projects and the Shark Tank were 30-day classes, and then I would rotate. Yep.
And how long each day, or how long of a period did you see them, and how long?
45 minutes a day for 30 days.
But every day for 30 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? So the exploratories were new. We still have those going on. These are 5th and 6th graders. They would sign up. This is a new thing that our school district just took on. So they would sign up for an exploratory for twice a week. It's becoming actually pretty popular in our area, in the Erie County and those school districts. The exploratory idea. My son's in a different school district and he does the same exact thing. They get to sign up. It rotates very similar to that special schedule that I just shared with you. So for 30 days, 45 minutes a day, and then it starts a new cycle. But in this case, these exploratories, they would come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And these are my 5th and 6th graders, and in order to come into the makerspace for their exploratory, they had to have a plan. So they weren't allowed to start anything till they came up with a plan. They had an idea. I want to learn how to do this. I want to take this on. If they didn't know, we would give them a challenge and they would work through those challenges. They had to stay on that for at least 3 days. Okay, that was my rule. Because what happens when you start a makerspace is it's playtime and it's recess time. Is that a bad thing? Not at first. That's necessary at first. When students have never been in a makerspace before, that idea is absolutely necessary. But eventually, you need to transition out of that. So giving them those challenges, the stuff that I shared with you today, that's the piece of taking it from that recess period to, okay, now we're going to move it on. Now we're going to do something with it. Everything needs to be purposeful. When we first started the Makerspace idea, they were building basketball hoops out of cardboard, and then they were taking masking tape and making balls and playing basketball. And then teachers would walk in and go, oh my gosh, what is she doing? You have a question?
I was just gonna ask, how long do you give them for that first recess period, that exploratory period before you move them into the?
Yeah, that maker thinking, that idea of thinking, that transition for students that have never been in that world before takes time. We had about a year to 2 for the students to just go in and play.
And kind of do what they want to their own devices and then.
Yeah, 100%. I'd say 1 to 2 years and then begin that transition. That is a really tough time because teachers, and I love art, and art has a curriculum in its own, but they walk into that makerspace and they go, what are you doing? This is crazy. And that's a little bit of a battle. The information that I'm sharing with you today about the idea of self-exploration, teamwork, collaboration, here's why we do what we do, self-discovery, that stuff needs to go out to the teachers. They need to know that. So they don't think that you're interfering on what they're doing or trying to trump that or anything like that. Be as transparent as possible, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I would say 1 to 2 years for that exploration period. Any other questions? This goes right hand in hand with project-based learning. If you have any science teachers that are jumping on board with project-based learning or ELA teachers, this is how you support them in that. Makerspace all the way. Having those materials that they can bring back to their classroom. We have an ELA teacher, she does a how-to unit, write a manual, and the students come into the makerspace for 3 days, they build something, and then they have to do a how-to, and they have a prototype right there. So they're looking at that image, they can see that, and now they're writing a paper. Okay, so now you're bringing in that build and create into the ELA classroom. Learning support kiddos, they're constantly in the makerspace, the life skills kiddos, using the Play-Doh, the clay, building a prototype. And then I'm just gonna end with the best way to start is just to simply start. So this is one of my favorite quotes that it pertains to the Makerspace. As I shared with you, I did include my contact information in this PowerPoint, so feel free to email me if you have any questions. If you want additional resources, if you want something from the elementary school or the high school, activities and ways that we've done it, I just didn't know what to include and what not to include, and this was already pretty long, so. Any questions for me? Please?
You have to limit the amounts of items that students can have, or have any limitations like that to be put on them?
You know what, I've done it both ways. So it's really interesting to say, hey, here's an index card, here's 5 straws, here's this much tape, let's see what you can do with it, or try to complete this task. So I've done it that way. That saves on materials. But I've also done it the other way, where it's just kind of open, let's see what you can do. When I do the passion projects, when I do things like that, the Shark Tank, I don't limit it. But with that said, there is a very lengthy discussion before I allow my students into the Makerspace. That's the other thing I didn't really talk about. Assuming you've already had that conversations with the students of how to use this space, right, and not abuse those materials, and it needs to be purposeful. It's fascinating to see what they can do when you don't limit them, but at the same time, it's fascinating to see what they can do when you do. So I think it depends on what your goal is. And then of course money. You're gonna have those big projects. So we have a teacher that does an artificial intelligence unit. They pair it with nonfiction text, and they go in and they build prototypes, and they have an artificial intelligence fair now. So the students get to walk in and vote, and they build boards, and so they're doing research and reading those articles, they're learning about artificial intelligence, and they build a prototype. A lot of those students will bring materials from home to support their project as well, because they know it's coming, they know their plan, they work in groups for that fair. So I think it just kind of depends on what your goal is there. And the other projects too, yeah, space is an issue as well. I will hear you. I went to Target and bought a kiddie pool for like literally nothing. They're really inexpensive. I was surprised. So that was sitting in my office, but then when we did challenges on them, how to, you know, build a boat out of just the aluminum foil and how much weight can it hold and this and that, I could just pull the kiddie pool down, fill it up with some water, moving on. So a lot of those things I would just have for those purposes.
You said that you had a pretty good foundation through your school district to start this. Are there any other kind of opportunities, things that people should explore if you want to start doing something like this that would be, we don't have a foundation in our school district?
Yes, there's a lot as far as grant opportunities. I don't have a list of them right now. I know like Walmart, Sam's Club, Home Depot, Tractor Supply, they actually just gave us $800 and stuff to hold our Vex robots from the school district I'm at now. And they will match a lot of those retail stores. They'll donate. And then Target. Is there anybody else wants to?
DonorsChoose.org is a great way to also get.
Yeah, some school districts, if they allow you to do that, I would check, because a lot of school districts are kind of good.
Our school district, or my school, each grade level got together, the teachers, and they decided what they would like to have in it. And then they sent a letter home to parents, and they donated. So you didn't have everyone bringing cotton balls, like Baby Kindergarten brought cotton balls. So the other class, you know, and
That's a good idea.
So
Yeah.
we supplied a ton of things.
And paper towel rolls and like those things, those are the hot items.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to spend crazy money. The hot ticket items are the cheap ones that are laying around the house. Truly.
Even like Lego.
Like yeah.
People getting cleaning their
Oh
house.
yeah.
Incredibly.
Garage sales.
Exactly.
Yes.
If anybody's in Philadelphia side, the other side of the state, in Ephrata, there's Art of Recycle.
It is a huge warehouse, everything is free, for teachers. They have a whole area and it's very cheap and we get tons of stuff for our makerspace.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
It's in Ephrata, it's called Art of Recycle.
There's also clear the list on Twitter. If you create an Amazon list, they go around Twitter every once in a while and people will just start the hashtag clear the list and like literally like famous people just watch for it and it's just grab teachers lists and clear them off of Amazon. So you just create an Amazon list and have the link ready and just share it on Twitter.
Any other questions?
I have one more comment.
Sure.
What shows anything. We're getting into political season and the core class signs that political campaigns use. If you call their offices, they'll usually give those to you after elections are over. And that's great material to make like you can have voting lives.
That's a great idea. Maybe fun. I will say this though, real quick. You can get electric cardboard cutters on Amazon. They are a little pricey, but they are worth every dollar that you spend. It's a safe option for students cutting cardboard. Especially when you have young children that just tend to, not pay attention.
There's also the art of recycle.
Yeah.
On that side of the city, there's also the Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Everybody stayed and everybody came and it was a full room. And now I can breathe.
Do we need a code for the special birthday?
What?
A code, like, to say that we were here for the evaluation?
I don't think so.
It's,
I think it's
just go
on
to the website and then, well, there's a link to review her and that type of thing. I don't know, do you guys, you said about you had a tech person that did your 3D printing for you. Do you guys have like a...
So we use Tinkercad at the middle school and the elementary school, and then the high school does SolidWorks.
Yeah, but do you have like a wood shop in your high school, for example?
Yeah, so we have a engineering, and then we have like a technology and education department.
Yeah. I have a tech ed teacher, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah. And then we actually have, so in the middle school itself, we had 4 3D printers in the library, and then our tech ed person had 4.
So, I don't see them in very many your style makerspaces, but laser engravers, they're pretty pricey.
Yes,
They're
he
amazing.
just got one.
You can do so much with them. If you ever have the opportunity to bring one into your makerspace, and one of the best resources for material is if you have like a woodworking shop in your area that does like cabinetry, they have tons of scraps and you can cut 1/4-inch plywood with them. So like I have kids make jewelry with them, I have kids make signs with them, and they like I just go every so often and they have a cart that's just full of it and I just go and load my truck up and take it in. But it's a great resource if that's
that's good, yeah.
something that you guys are, because it sounds like you're
Take it to the next level.
right. It sounds like you continue to really raise the bar. And a lot of people are literally just playing with paint and straws, whereas you guys have a lot more going on.
We're trying.
Right. So that's a
Kids challenge.
that's a great
That's
way.
good to know.
Like I don't know if you care about this or not.
No, yeah.
Actually, it's right here. I just had to do. We applied for a grant because we're making a grant that was for making. It's like $10,000, but we had to include a video. So this is ridiculous. Like this is just us 3D printing, but so the laser engraver is cutting out that 1/4-inch plywood. and then we're in a competition called Best, and they give you the materials to build a robot. So like,
Oh, very cool.
like 90% of that robot
We
is
just
built.
got a grant for, well, it was a Vex Robot grant. We're in
Yeah.
the PA Roll Robotics now.
Cool. We do Vex, and we use Vex, but we don't compete
That's
in
like
Vex.
taking it to the whole next.
Right. So like,
Now you're building it. Now you're
right. So like the kids
thinking
designed.
through that process.
Yeah, the kids
guess that's what,
designed
like,
and drew that, and then cut that out.
That's
on the laser.
awesome because it takes them to the next.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can do some really incredible stuff.
That's
Obviously,
very cool.
you know, you need the tools to do it, but you don't need to have if you want to do stuff